One of our vows was, I will love you forever as I do right now. So we chose love as the foundation. Love meaning I'm going to look at myself, become self-responsible, and choose to love you in the face of whatever arises so that I can grow and you can grow. And we were best friends. If I walked in a room, he would, I'm going to tear up. He would point to me and he would say, do you know who she is? And then he would say, she's my BFF. I felt the same way because I knew for the first time in my life that someone stuck with me through everything. I was with him with all of his lovers and relationships with his children and his family and his father. And what came out of that is who I am today as a result of being loved so completely in my shadow and my light. So if you want to talk about somatic pleasure, right? No matter aging, weight, not weight, what beauty, not beauty, whatever it is, can we be there for the pleasure of the essence of the human that we're with and look at ourselves, at the thoughts we're having about that person, because that is a mirror of who I am.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Somatic Pleasure Podcast. Today I am joined by Linda Shekinah Fischer. I'm just going to let that name sit with you for a minute because I really want you to remember it. I met Shekinah a couple of years ago, maybe more like 3 years ago now, when I was on a pilgrimage driving across the United States, and I drove into New Mexico to visit a friend, and I was looking for communities, and I drove around to the east side of the state to this place called Hummingbird Ranch. And I had been talking to a couple of people there before I got there, and they said, you got to go talk to Shekinah. And she just happened to be there because she normally travels quite a bit. And we sat in her living room and drank tea. And it was one of the easiest, most in-depth conversations that I'd had in a very long time. And just with the ease that we dropped in was amazing. And today's episode is no different. We drop into 46 years in recovery and near-death experiences and real death experiences and grief. And we drop into the sensuality of grief and the sensual connection with nature and our inner nature and our erotic authority. And this episode, like you would when you're walking in the wilderness in nature with the wind, it breathes. It sort of whispers through the trees. It lifts your skirt. I will tell you, this is an amazing conversation and deep, filled with wisdom, super sexy. We talk about what it means to age and maintain your sexuality as women, as men. And it is just a fabulous ride through many, many years of deep personal work. And this outcome that allows for an aliveness and an awareness that we can all learn to have every day. So let's drop in with Shekinah. Shekinah.
Yes.
So good to see you.
Thank you. It's so good to be with you. Just feel joyful looking at you. It's so fun. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. That I was thinking the same way. You just have this great smile. You got a really solid presence, and yeah, it just you feel really grounded.
Thank
always have
you.
ever since I met you. I remember just kind of.
Thank you. So good. But, there's an ease about the relationship between us, and love the work you're doing. And I look forward to getting into some juicy conversations about who we are today.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to getting to know some more things about you. Like, I don't know how I missed it, but you wrote a book. So we're going to talk about that a little
I
bit.
did.
And, I finally got to see your website after so much time. And all the activity, the things that you're doing, and you're coming up. There's a new program coming up, it looks like, on the 26th of May. And I want to jump into that a little bit at some point, have you talk about your offerings. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. And just to let you know, you can cut that out because I can't do it since I've got to be with Dad.
Oh, okay. We'll cut that.
Yeah. It just happened. So, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. We've had a lot of enrollment, but I'm families first.
Mhm. So one of the things that I I knew about you to a certain extent, but I didn't realize how big of a piece of your life it was, and that is 46 years of recovery. And I'm starting out with that because it feels like you went into that in your 20s, and it just feels like it's been this theme that has informed so much of your work.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I'd love to hear, um, what did that awakening moment feel like, or what happened, whatever you'd like to go into, and how
It's
that
such a
lands in your body.
Well, it certainly is. I would say it was a rebirth, right? I had uh, there's alcoholism in my family, in my lineage on both sides, and I'm of the age that when I got clean and sober, because I was also an addict, it wasn't in vogue. I was 25 years young, and I had not a clue who I was at that moment. I used alcohol and drugs to cover trauma. Didn't know it was that either at that time. Thought I was crazy because there was not treatment centers and they would put me in institutions. That was how they dealt with the emotions. We talk about somatic pleasure. Well, in that, I believe that it has to do with how we can be in our bodies. And I was not in my body. I wanted as far away from the trauma that I felt in my body as I could get. When I was almost 20 years old, I had a near death experience. I was on an operating table. They were attempting to save my life after an overdose and a suicide attempt. And I was above my body and I didn't know it was me. And I had this most amazing experience where I was given the opportunity to feel who I am as the essence of love. And I truly believe in the somatic pleasure experience, coming back to understanding one's essence. And it all has to do with an inside job. And so recovery set me on a trajectory of curiosity and inquiry. It was not easy. I'm not sitting here today saying that, but I am saying it activated in me an opportunity to become alive.
Wow, that is, I had gone into, I'll just, I myself went into recovery in my very end of my 20s, so just before I turned 30. And there was a similar thing in that awakening piece, that one of the things that I remember was that I finally realized I couldn't do this all by myself.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the recovery, it was life. It was the trauma. It was and yeah, the language wasn't there. Wasn't that amazing? I mean, just the language of and the understanding of this, there was just more of that, feels like more of like a judgment, there's something wrong with you. You're broken somehow. You need to get fixed. And I do remember, like the recovery, the 12 steps, and that. started to give me some language, and I went
Mm.
personally, much further into understanding of what that is. And so I really appreciate you bringing that in, that essence, the somatics, the pleasure side of life, where we can. I tell people healing doesn't have to hurt all the time. um, so it's been over 4 decades since you've gone into recovery, and so what feels different about your relationship to pleasure and the erotic now at what, 71 years old?
Yeah, 71 and never thought I would make it to 30, so quite a jump. So what is different is that I'm no longer afraid to be in my body.
Mhm.
I know who I am and I know who I'm not. The journey to eroticism to me, which is deep pleasure. I was in the forest yesterday and Saturday for hours walking along the riverbanks, and they are raging right now due to, I live in New Mexico and the mountain snow's coming down and we've had rain. And noticing the pleasure of the senses. So there was so many memories that were triggered by the senses. Memories of when I first arrived here 28 years ago, memories of David and our time here, and being in the particular areas of the forest. And somatics is about memory in the body, tapping into both from the senses of the smells and the sight. And so, was it just my smell? It was probably everything, the wind on my skin. So, a lot of times people think about eroticism, pleasure has to do with sex, sexual acts, sexual touching. For me, it encompasses, can I live that way every moment of my day? Which, no, I have not been able to do. But can I do that with more aliveness and presence? And so coming into recovery, I wanted, as I said, as far away from this body as possible. Cultural narratives will have us not be able to feel the eroticism of who we are. Um, Shame, emotional feelings that bring in shame or guilt or whatever the emotion is, keeps one away from eroticism, I believe. I'm a ontological coach, so I'm really looking at language, body, and emotions when I'm working with someone. Where are you when you're having these conversations with yourself? Are you in your thinking mind? Are you in your body? Are you allowing all of them to be there? So I think at this stage, I continue to believe that my life is about an uncovering. I haven't arrived. I love a lot of the people I hang out with are a lot younger than I am because I am so alive and not believing that at my stage of life, I have all the answers. As a matter of fact, I have more questions than I have answers today.
That is so incredible to hear that too. The hanging out with the younger crowd.
Yes.
Did that a lot this weekend. We did this 1 day festival, and I was the oldest person at 60. I was the oldest person in the. Someone even said, "Well, it's too bad you're not about 30 years younger because you would." All right, I can take that. That's okay. But there's a couple of different threads that I want to pull on here.
Please.
One is, you said walking in the woods and here, and you were talking about land. I want to talk a little bit more about where you actually are because I've been there and I have felt the energy in this place, Hummingbird Ranch, and I got to meet David a few years ago, and I'm just so glad that I, got that experience to tap in with that guy because just an amazing person, and I know that he is your beloved, a beloved of yours, and so
Yeah.
you this time and this sort of I want magic area, the hummingbird, and then the loving connections there, and
Yeah.
I just want to tap into that a little bit, and
Yeah, thank you.
I'm there in your relationship with him in the place.
So I'm looking out there now, and Hummingbird Ranch has been around. We purchased the land in '96, and I think what happens, just like it happens with a human being, when we nurture, right? When we nurture the land, when we nurture our bodies, when we nurture those we love, what transpires? I think what happens is that the aliveness, the energy of that land, person, being becomes more activated. I don't become activated by ignoring myself or ignoring somebody I love or not going out to the land and like I placed a crystal in one of the um, base of a tree that's across from an area where a mountain lion had been seen. And there's crystals that we put all over this land, just acknowledging the mother, acknowledging her beauty. And so for me, I think the land, I think the mother nature is beautiful everywhere, but are we nurturing her? Are we acknowledging her and thanking her? Because I think that's what happens in relationships, James. If I come on this call and I ignore you and I pretend like it's all about me and I don't acknowledge what you mean to me, the time that we've had together, acknowledges your radiance and the contribution it's had in my life is what has happened with David and I. David and I started a relationship in '96 in St. Louis. We were friends. Then at about 6 months later, we began dating on his birthday. And then I moved to Hummingbird with him, and we were partners and lovers and owned a business together. Um, and there were issues in the relationship because I believe that our somatic energy calls forth what it needs for, and there's a saying that I say it this way: love brings up anything unlike itself for the purpose of healing.
Mm.
So when I go into a love relationship, if I think that the only thing that's going to be there is what I feel in the beginning, I've really set myself up. And David and I did mirror behavior together that eventually caused the demise of the marriage, but it didn't take apart the commitment we had. One of our vows was, I will love you forever as I do right now. So we chose love as the foundation. Love meaning I'm going to look at myself, become self-responsible, and choose to love you in the face of whatever arises so that I can grow and you can grow. And we were best friends. If I walked in a room, he would, I'm going to tear up. He would point to me and he would say, do you know who she is? And then he would say, she's my BFF. I felt the same way because I knew for the first time in my life that someone stuck with me through everything. I mean, everything. I was with him with all of his lovers and relationships with his children and his family and his father. And what came out of that is who I am today as a result of being loved so completely in my shadow and my light. So if you want to talk about somatic pleasure, right? No matter aging, weight, not weight, what beauty, not beauty, whatever it is, can we be there for the pleasure of the essence of the human that we're with and look at ourselves, at the thoughts we're having about that person, because that is a mirror of who I am, not a mirror of who they are.
Damn it.
Yeah, so my thoughts about you being this particular person is a mirror of who I am. Doesn't mean that I don't have it right. It just means that without my eyes to see, I cannot see.
I had a lover one time tell me that she would love to be able to see herself through my eyes, like how I saw her, and yeah, these connections that we just stay with and commit to, and through thick and thin, through breakups, through togetherness, through sex or non-sex, all of those pieces. And the part where you were talking about the connection to the mother or to nature, and that intimacy that we can develop with that. I mean, we are intimately connected anyway, so it's not even about like developing, it's about removing the blinders to what is happening, is the way I see it. That
Yeah.
kind of, we're removing the blinders to what's happening here between us. That energy, even though we're not in the same room, is coming into coherence and cohesion. And it's sexy as fuck.
Yeah.
It really is,
Yeah.
but it's sexy in the way, like you were talking about it, that is just long term, and knowing that you're held
It's alive.
and alive. Yeah. And so, that the somatic pleasure or the erotic authority, these places, it sounds like, oh no, you just got to be together and, doing the duty, doing the act. But it's like, it's happening all the time. It's like a bubbling well of just goodness. That's the way I look at it and the way I feel about it. What I would like to impart on people, and what it feels like you are imparting on people as well in your work. And there's something that you said at some point, is that, no matter how far down the rabbit hole you've gone, your experiences can benefit others. You have usefulness.
Yeah.
And
Purpose.
yeah. So how did you come to know that in your body? And how
Yeah.
do you others claim that kind of worth in your work?
It's a commitment to discovery, uncovering, curiosity, dark nights of the soul. I tell people I've had more dark nights of the soul than any one person needs to have. And I want to step back because you brought up the word alone in the very beginning of the podcast. And David was a wordsmith. David actually was the one that helped me fall in love with language and words. And he was so good at double entendres. And the word alone in it has all one.
I was
So
just running that through my head, like, oh, okay, that's great.
So if we can, I had agoraphobia in my life. I could not hardly go outside my home when I first got sober. I could go to work, had a real difficult time. I don't understand it all. I don't know if it has to do with ancestral lineages, past lives, current times. Who knows everything that's we're being affected by? But are we willing to discover and uncover that place inside of us that is a mystery? And there's nothing wrong with us, yet we have a world that says that if you look a certain way and you speak a certain way and you have a certain education and you're from a certain family with money or not money or whatever the story is, everybody has to uncover the story. And so the question was, how did I become? I'm becoming. Early on in recovery, I started seeking spirituality. I studied Ekankar. I studied an Indian guru for years. When I met David, I was bald. I studied the Red Road and did vision quests. I studied nothing. I mean, there was those moments. All of them helped to uncover in me things that are hard to put to words, my aliveness, that instead of being small and encapsulated and held tight, I started blooming, right? Um, and no, I'm no longer afraid of me. And one would say, that's odd. You live inside here. No, I want it outside. And when I started to be able to live in here, I could feel, I could feel my pleasure centers. I could feel sensations. And when I get afraid today, I need to come back to what are my thoughts, right? Where is the dullness? Can I breathe into those places and expand them and ask him to talk to me? Yeah.
And I'm just imagining, and I just kind of want to pull it back to this little piece a little bit, but I'm imagining that when you work with other people, that there's something along those lines that you're bringing to them. Is that, and do you have like experience that something that you witnessed that you could that you
Yeah. Yeah.
shows the validity of that?
Absolutely. I mean, we're witness for each other right now. Um, I know that the words that I'm using might be a little bit formed differently in sentences, but you have an understanding through your own somatic experiences and life experiences of what I speak about. And then we are able to see that in others and recognize, we none of us arrive. We all start at someplace along the roadmap. And I used to say, I always thought everybody else had a roadmap to life and I didn't get it. Right. And then I found out nobody has a roadmap. You make your own. Right. It's by trying to stay on the roadmap that caused me danger and trouble. I was brought up in a military family, very strict.
Mhm.
And being able to think outside the box wasn't encouraged. Actually, it was considered as dangerous. And actually, what was dangerous for me was staying inside the box. And so when I work with others, I meet them where they are and we set goals and help one to become more alive and more of a relational person with themselves and others. Um, I want to come back to words because there's a saying that I love, and I wrote it down because I didn't know if I could remember, but it has to do with, that words create worlds. Our language shapes through communication, but it also helps us to understand our thoughts and our beliefs and the fabric of what our experiences are. And that to me will either give us the experience of eroticism or it'll take away the experience of eroticism. So if I'm curious about my thoughts and the emotions and sensations instead of having answers, as soon as I have answers, it closes my world down. I think answers are going to make me feel better, but the truth of it is, all it does is really keeps me from looking a little bit further. And sometimes I think we all have to come to a moment we go, yes. Like when I found out that I had an ism, I was addicted, there was like, oh my God, thank God I'm not a crazy person. Um, but to recognize that beyond that, that was the beginning of the questions. It wasn't the end of the questions. And in a world where people don't get curious enough, as far as I'm concerned. They take what somebody tells them at face value or news at face value or the narratives they grew up with in their religions or whatever it is. And that really closes us in from, who we're becoming. Last thing I want to say is I could never be in nature. I was raised on an Air Force base to be a priss. I wasn't allowed to mow grass because that was a man's job, you know? And I remember my first vision quest. Wow. Being out in the forest and by myself and, hardly anything. Um, and then all of a sudden, I figured if I can do that, then there's something else there for me, right? Didn't say it was easy. There was a lot of sensations.
Oh my gosh, Shekinah, there's so many threads in there. And you're talking about words. I mean, it's called spelling for a reason. And I love that because, it, And what you were talking about, there's all kinds of information going on all the time. And at any moment, we can concretize our experience of the moment through words. But it's really just one small choice out of a huge plethora of choices that are available to us to how we want to concretize this moment is the way that's kind of the way I look at it. It's like words bring it right down to that boom, you know, it's the smallest piece. But to feel and to allow yourself to feel underneath the words, in the nonverbal, in the sensate, sensations. I know this. Sensations are not just the five senses. We have vestibular, that balance. We feel the spin of the earth. We can feel the barometric pressure changing. Our body's processing these things all the time. So, um, and then we need to walk around and talk to each other and eat and, and get along. So it's just like, what a beautiful, what a beautiful experience this life is. And it's so complex and so wide when you get curious the way that you're talking about. I mean, just like, oh my God, there's just so much going on all the time. There's no way I can be bored, you know. Then there's also the feelings, right, which was part of my experience, and it sounds like maybe it was part of your experience. It's like there was so much going on that I was open to, but I had no training. All I had was
Right.
the boxes and the conditioning, and this is the way God would want you to do it, or this is the way the government wants you to do it, and um, no way to hold all of that stuff. So, I mean, drinking or whatever it was like a viable choice to just kind of shut that stuff down. Yeah.
Can you imagine? I used to sit with a needle in my arm for almost 3 years daily. You wanna talk about sensation? I wanted to feel when I felt pleasure, which would have been also through being touched. In the time that I was raised in, it was, if a man made love with a woman or had women, he was considered to having notches in his belt. If a woman did it, she was considered to be a whore. So I've always had a lot of sensations in my body, and I can remember being called even by my father a whore and a slut and a bitch even before I was, and it was his own wounding, and so it wounded me. And then when I did find the sensations like alcohol that either numbed me or intravenous drugs, which gave me a feeling sensation, I was always chasing that feeling, right? And then to find out one can come alive inside one's body and feel it themselves meant I needed to face what I would call the illusion of separation from anything unlike itself, unlike love. Like love for me had to be considered to unravel, and still to this day, understanding that I don't find it in another human being in order to love myself. So there's a lot to unpack in our lives, and it can be so daunting or it can be so exciting to come alive. I I don't know when one reaches the point that it's so exciting. I don't think it's the same for everyone. But when we reach that point where we realize, oh my gosh, it's an evolutionary journey, it's not an arrival, right? I am still, I'm going to tell on myself. I've been listening to these erotic books. I'm very auditory. And I've been doing this because I wanted to feel the pleasure in my body without another human being there.
Hmm.
Right? Really noticing what happens. Like, I don't know these things unless I explore them. Somebody might make judgment. They might go, "Oh, that's, whatever they think that is." But it's amazing to recognize what came up by listening. Oh, I got to hide this from people. And what are they going to think of me? Right? That came up. And then there was this, oh my gosh, the sensations. My whole body is like tantalized. And then, of course, there was pleasuring myself, right? This is exploration at this stage of my life. when I die, is anybody going to ask me, you know, something like that? No, I think they're going to ask me, did I live? Did I come alive? Did I question living? Did I explore who I am and what my thoughts are? I don't, I think, well, we didn't talk about the fact that David passed almost a year ago. And that opened up a whole nother level of, am I alive? Am I truly living? Right? I'm sure he didn't sit down that day and think I'm going to pass. He sat down and he was gone within seconds. So where I am today is to be around people that choose to experience their aliveness, that allow me to explore that and to have those conversations that might not have been encouraged. I love getting on your what do you call it when we get together? I just forgot.
Community calls,
Yeah,
pan.
your community calls, and we talk about eroticism and sensation and messages, and I love listening to somebody else and finding out where they are, because it opens up an avenue, a tributary for me about something I might explore. I
You
think
know,
that's what.
it's one of those things where, not waiting for those people to show up. I mean, there's the sensation and the connection, which, that I know you said somewhere too, connection heals addiction. And there's the experiment with rats where they gave them two bottles, one that was filled with heroin or cocaine and one that was filled with just water. And when they were by themselves, they just kept hitting the drug bottle. But when they were put into a place where there was community and movement and the ability to be rats with other rats, they basically ignored the other one, so it's just that's this is my attempt to create a rat cage that's, got lots of
And
fun.
they thrive, and they
Yeah.
thrive, and they thrive. And that's what finding your people, if you have an addiction, find your people. You might have shame when you start out because you've never done it before, but to be witnessed and to witness others really creates thriving for others. And yeah, I think the thing that comes up for me as we're talking, I don't know where we're going to meet people along their journey, but to know that where I started and where I am now, I could have never imagined. But to be with people that accept me in my thriving and my becoming, and that I accept them in their thriving and becoming, and I can be curious rather than judging, right?
There you go with the word curiosity again.
True.
It's an invaluable
Everything.
trait.
It's everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And did you feel like when you were a child that you were a curious child, like you wanted to find things out? And then, like, if so, what was your experience around that and maybe not being allowed to?
Yeah, I believe I was a curious child. I don't remember when that stopped. I remember being around 5 and my parents didn't like how psychic I was. And I wanted to bring the word intuition in. What happens as one comes more inside themselves is they learn to trust their own intuition. One learns to notice where in the body intuition comes forth. And I was 5, and I remember living in Germany, and someone came in our home, and I, like, read their field and told what was going on, and my parents, in order to control that, gave me a nickname of a newspaper that was on the Air Force Base, so when they would call me that, it would shame me.
Mm,
And shame is a community, it's a break in the community, and so you don't wanna be broken from the community, so I stopped doing it. And so I think the curiosity was there up until probably about 5 when it really got numbed down. And what does one do if they can't trust themselves?
Right.
Then we look outside and we give our power to someone else, right?
Something else.
Or something else, absolutely, or something else, yes.
Wow. That's just really, really powerful to just kind of sit with that for a minute. And what do you do when your natural curiosity and intuitive self is shut down and shamed? Not just shut down, but shamed. And, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, but maybe more in the sense of, like going from addiction into recovery and sobriety. But outside of that, how would you see people being able to shift from the cultural narratives of shame and disconnection into like a more reverential or aliveness kind of narrative?
Maybe with that question, because it's a big question.
Shekinah, I'm going to stop for just a second. We're going to cut this little piece out. There's a guy directly outside of my window mowing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
No worries.
I'm just going to pause for a second and give it. Are you okay with that?
I am.
Okay. I'll resume the recording and 3, 2.
Yeah.
So in that, when we're caught in that narrative of the shame and the disconnect, how do you see yourself or helping other people move into that more alive and reverential, let's call it, place?
What a beautiful question. I mean, it's such an invitation, James. Even the words you used, words have meaning, they have importance and value. And, when we're speaking about it, whatever the it is, if we can give it more sustenance. I want to just step back and just say that coming from my background, I knew how to read, but I didn't know meanings of words. I thought I knew meanings of words, and I had difficulty enunciating sometimes. And so I jumped into learning about the importance of the meaning of words because they create worlds, as I said earlier. And so when we're looking at how to get past the narratives or involved in the narratives where they're awakened inside of us, I think it's an awakening. It is really a little bit like connecting the dots. Did you ever have a picture book when you were a kid and
I
okay,
love the connect the dots.
connect
Yeah.
the dot and you thought you knew what the picture was going to be and then it surprised you? I think that's what happens when we create an intention because something is lacking or something is calling us in our bodies to do something different. And the universe, whatever you would like to call that divine energy, will begin to put in our place people, places, and things that will support where we're going and where we would like to go. But we have to intend it. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. So I think the fact that when I went to my first recovery meeting and then I intended that I wanted to stay sober and clean worse than I wanted to be nuts and crazy, um, and that I would go to any length. I really meant that. I mean, it was to be free of the drive every day to harm myself or somebody else was so much greater. And I think what happens is that there's some source of discomfort. You said we don't have to have pain. I agree with you, but I do think pain is an activator and it helps us know that something is not sitting right with us. And it doesn't have to be wrong. It can be an activator and say, you know what, this isn't working anymore. I've got to do something different. I need to do something different. And then something will become transparent in our lives. Okay. And like right now, you and I have been talking now for about a year, and there's more that's becoming transparent as a result of that in my life. I love astrology. Today is a full moon in Scorpio. I have a full moon in Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio moon.
No wonder I
And
feel so damn good. I'm a Scorpio. So
yeah, well, so is David. David's birthday was November 13th.
I was the 21st. So yeah.
Okay. So I think if someone becomes interested in astrology or some different somatic practice, or they meet someone like you who's working with individuals, that we step into it. We don't have to jump. We can. It's okay. But if it feels a little tenuous, take a step. Be curious. Um,
Yeah.
freedom. By asking questions and not accepting the narratives that I've received throughout my life, began creating freedom where I began to know who I am at my essence. That I wasn't the sum of everybody else, but there was someone who had opinions. I didn't even know what my opinions were.
That's right.
So we all start at a different place along the trajectory of life when we come into what you're asking about, which is, facing the narratives. And I think being gentle is so important, and finding people that will be gentle with you or meet you where you are is so very important. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say too, when I say that, healing doesn't have to hurt, what I really mean is that life is going to be hard at times. You don't have to go out and search for it. So,
Right.
I've been in different healing modalities and paths and where people just seem to like, oh, this really has to gotta really work hard. This is, oh my God. Because and so that's what kind of has led me to come at it from pleasure path. You know, let's really feel what's going on and recognize, the beauty of even the painful parts of it. Because yes, stripping away that conditioning and stripping away that um the cultural shame and different things like that is not easy. Stepping away from the narrative that you came in with, or that you grew up with, is sometimes like ripping a scab off of a wound. I mean, it can be horrible, feel horrible. You know what I mean?
We're stepping away from our tribe in some way, from the
Exactly.
agreement field. There's so much that I could say about this. I normally, and I'm going to take that back. I came out with a book in 2020, but I want to talk about that from a different angle. Um, almost 5 years ago, today is what, the 12th, on the 15th, my only sibling went up on the roof of his utility barn in Michigan and fell through the barn roof onto a concrete floor, and has been basically incapacitated in a nursing home for 5 years. He doesn't talk, doesn't have a long or short term memory. Everything is done for him. He does eat. His eyes are open, but he no longer recognizes myself or his wife. But there's an essence there. And that was another journey for me into sensation, into um, that place where I began asking questions, right? And being curious. He was the one who wanted me to write the book that I came out with in November of 2020 and never actually got to see it in the form that we knew each other in. I'm sure he knows it on some level. And when we start on this journey, we just never know what the opportunities of life experiences are going to give us to awaken us. And what it awakened me to, my brother's name is Ron, uh, is where wasn't I living my life? This is a man who had just retired from being a nurse anesthetist and was planning on going to Morocco with his wife, financially was set for life, and there's nothing he could do. He sits in a chair. They move him with a Hoyer. So 5 years ago, I said, what else can I do in my life to be alive and do it for him and for me? To not use excuses. Now, it doesn't say they don't come up in my life, but I'm looking at, I don't live my life like I'm 71. No, that's my chronological age. I live my life as, what is it that I would love to do today? I've been a power lifter since I'm 25. I work out, I hike, I bike, I do all kinds of things. I travel a lot. People say, well, you're never home. Well, not so true. I'm back about every 6 weeks and then I'm gone again. And the reason why is because I can. I'm curious about what's out there. So, in this world that we're in, we will have life experiences, as you mentioned, and they will either make us or break us. At the beginning, it almost broke me. He was my person. And then I lost the other person, David, and my father's on the precipice of going. And what I had to learn was, where were my attachments inside towards other people, places, or things that I was not facing in here because I had them to live through?
That is that is a deep question. Oh
Well,
my God,
there
that is
was a lot there. And still I'm uncovering. So what I'm saying is, wherever you are on this trajectory, and those in the audience and you and it's, can I remember that it never ends, but that I have a plethora of information through people, places, and things that can help me along this path to become more enlivened by life. Do I grieve? I have grieved more in the last 5 years than I ever knew was possible. And I felt a lot of shame from grieving. I noticed other people weren't crying. How they dealt with things was how I couldn't hold it in and others could hold it in. I was judging myself. And I could go on and on. And so, where are we, in this process? I had to learn that I'm unique in this evolution to James or anybody else that I have a relationship to. And I'm going to bring a piece of that connecting the dot, and you're going to bring a piece, and then together we're going to form a picture, uh, 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 an image. And that image is going to change based on my next experience.
I love that so much, Shekinah. I mean, it's just, there's a term out in the zeitgeist right now you called, um, relationship anarchy.
Mm,
And kind of the way I read it, not saying that's how other people read it or the people that invented the term, but is very similar to what you're talking about, where I am me, autonomous, sovereign, and um I know that I need other people because I'm also human and there's the need for community, but every connection is unique.
yeah.
There's something there, right? And then, if it's being used as a way to not look at myself in my sovereignty and my in my autonomy, then that's another thing to look at, and that's always what's going to happen. And just listening to you, because there was another place where you quoted, recovery became more than just healing from addiction. It was about rediscovering my passion, my purpose, and my pleasure. And what it seems like is you're talking about this reclamation of your true, authentic, erotic self, your nature, you know, and talking about how it shows up in your body. Like, I just feel like a lot of people don't pay enough attention to that, or they don't have the words even. Like when you start, maybe this is some of your experience, but when you start giving people words to the things, and you give to the things that they're feeling, and you give them permission to feel them, to talk about them. I don't know if this is your experience, but I can even just say, just on Saturday when we had this mini 1-day festival, that some of the people coming in there, just there's this blossoming. There was one gentleman who, he's like, I'm here with my wife. This is not my wheelhouse. This is not, I am not that guy necessarily, but man, he just, like, I watched him just really drop into these and begin to express, because there was permission and there was a container for it. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'd love to hear some of your more of your. I'm just gonna, we could say over 2 or 3 hours, I'm sure, but I'd love to hear more of your experience around that kind of inquiry, and helping people return to their sensual selves.
Well, I love that he identified first as saying this isn't normally, I'm going to use the word normally. He may not have used that, my wheelhouse. And I think it is being willing to step outside your one's wheelhouse, right? Um, and try on something different and know that you don't have to make a commitment to it. You're investigating, right? Notice the words. What does investigate mean? What does words mean that begin to go, oh yeah, that's just looking and being exploring and being in wonderment, right? And so what I heard is that there was a container. What does that mean? That means that we're holding you so that there's a safety that happens. And if we went back to what we talked about in the beginning, Shekinah got clean and sober, which was a safety place. And then she kept exploring and she put herself in other groups and there was a container and she kept doing that, right? And I continue to do that. And I think that it is important for us to continue. It's like traveling. We're not going to stay stagnant. If that's, um, how can we, if they're listening, if anybody's listening to this, you're not going to stay stagnant, but I want to talk about, I want to go back to like, first of all, I never wrote this book because I wanted to be an author. I'm not an author. What I mean by that is, what?
What's the name of the book again?
It's called From Hell to Heaven, 16 Lessons and Blessings to Inspire Your Journey Beyond Recovery. The word inspiration. So when I listen to a podcast, and I listen to a lot of them, I want to be inspired. It means to breathe life into something, right? And so beyond recovery to me is we don't just recover once. We're recovering all the time. We're uncovering and recovering from something. And in the book, I did a story and then a lesson that I learned from the story and a blessing that came after that. When I think about this journey that we're on with eroticism and somatic sensation, right? When you were talking about it a second ago, and it brought up the fact that I'm sitting here, there's a glass table. That table has a sensation. It's smooth to my fingertips. If we just started with, and it's cool, how could I describe what that feels like? I have a pillow behind my back because I am a short woman and my feet don't reach and the seat is wide, right? Length of it. And so I can feel the pressure of the pillow and the softness and the hardness of the seat I'm on. It's an oak chair. So sensation begins wherever you are. One side of my face has a cool air and the other side has a bit more warmth because the sun is outside the window. I have a sensation in my pelvic area. Like this is a very creative podcast for me. So I am bringing in the root of who I am and the sensation of creativity that comes from my root. One could call that perineum area. One could call that in my sexual energy, whatever one wants to call it. But I know that today there's a tightness there. There's an opening because I'm being transparent. we begin to remember our sensations when we allowed ourselves to meet ourselves where we are, not where we want to be. And then we notice whatever thought is created around there. Should I have said that on a podcast? Um, what if somebody hears this and they know me? I don't really care. I'm an open book, but I'm making a joke in a way. But our aliveness can start right where we are, right? And on my deathbed, I don't care about what I accomplished. I care about that I lived. It can be messy as hell, or it can be tidy, or whatever, but I lived. I didn't sit still and let somebody decide that for me. Yeah.
That statement you just made, aliveness can start where you are. And I would
Yes.
ask you to, if you had a practice that you wanted to or could give us to uh, to help people return back to this sensual self. I mean, you kind of already
I
did it.
just did
You
it.
kind
Yeah.
of.
So let's just take it another. So if you're listening to this podcast, you're either standing and doing something while you're listening, or you're seated or lying down. Allow
Driving.
yourself just driving. Notice, what is the ice seeing? What is what can you smell? What texture is the blanket that you might be laying on, or what, it's in order for me to come back to me, I need to come back to sensation, right? If I notice, like, my stomach, right, the third chakra, the mid part of the body, just below the sternum, is it tight? Can I breathe life into it? Let the breath bring me home further. If somebody's saying something and I notice irritation, what is it about what they're saying that I'm allowing myself to experience irritation? And I say experience because it is an experience. It's informing. We often judge it. I shouldn't feel that way. Yeah. So if everything can be an inquiry, now I'm talking to myself too. I don't do this 24/7. I do it more than I don't. But being alive in the exploration of every parts of myself will allow me to come into the body more frequently, right?
Or just recognize that that's actually where you are all the time. I mean, there's no other place you are. And this is a little bit of a,
Truly,
uh,
that's quite a statement, though. That is a very true statement.
well, and something that I think it was yesterday I heard it, and I mean, it's a little non sequitur, but, saying that, time is a farce basically because there is no past and there is no future only in the way we think about it, but the moment is always happening. So it's not even that idea of like I need to bring myself into the moment, I need to bring myself back into my body. It's the way I look at it. Sounds like maybe you can jump on board with that, is that there's this recognizing that this is where we are. This is where we are. This is, that's, and I loved how you said it, coming back to the sensation, coming back to the sensation. That's the thing. That's the place where I start being alive. And you were, you said about irritation and, these experiences. And so there's these words and these phrases that we use to, describe where we are in the given moment. And I'm just wondering if in your ontological study and practice and teaching, if there's any phrases or words that you've basically retired because they no longer fit the truth of your body or your life?
Always. The word always, never. Um,
I'll never say that again.
right. When people talk about uh, what is alive for me, because you might even relate to this. You're 60 years young now, and I notice how people talk about their age, right, and who they're supposed to be, right, and I negate that. I truly believe that I'm more than the sum of my age. My sex life is greater now than it's ever been in my life. When I have a sexual partner, it is, because I'm free, right? I can be present with such an open heart, and I'm not, if I'm in fear, I can talk about it or whatever is going on. But we have a narrative in our culture about all kinds of stages of life. And so I'm just happen to be talking about being what's considered to be an elder or a wisdom holder. Well, I'm only as wise as what I listen to sometimes, and I can be really stupid if I wanted to be. Um, but what I'm talking about is, what does that mean to me? What does it mean to me to be 25 or 40 or 50? I define that. Are you letting somebody else define that? And so therein lies how we are going to live, how our aliveness is going to be affected,
Mm-hmm.
right? So being in the body, we have thoughts, and notice, how does that thought have you experience yourself? If I think I'm ugly or I've gained a few pounds and I have a story about that, all of that's going to affect my aliveness. So I think I'm answering your question. For me, it's all about meeting yourself where you are, which is what I heard, and what is alive right now. And even if that thing that it rises isn't really doesn't make me feel real joyful. Well, what would make me feel joyful if I faced it? Right?
Well, you absolutely answered way more than even the question. That these questions are just prompts. I mean, it's just a curiosity
Juicy.
exploration. It's juicy, but there's this piece I want to come back to. And okay, so you're over 70, and I was just actually interviewed another woman who's in her 70s, and both of you talked about like juicy and still very sexual, and even maybe even better than it was when you were younger. And there is that narrative, and I hear it all the time, and I even get it, reflected back to me. Well, you're not getting any younger, and they lose, they become impotent, and they don't get the hard-ons, and they whatever, and women, become dry and fragile, and these kinds of things. So I'm kind of trying to bring this around. I just want to have this conversation
Yeah,
partially.
let's have it. Bring it on.
It's not a conversation that's had a lot, but how would you I won't say instruct, but what kind of advice would you give to women as they are, chronologically aging, and they're hearing these narratives and they're dropping into these places, that um and people lose partners, and then they haven't had sex for years, and then they're like, oh shit, and it hurts, and there's all kinds of things that happen to that. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you want to talk about, obviously.
Well, I do think it comes back to what we think about, what we surround ourselves with. What are you reading? So when I started going through menopause, I did not read all kinds of books about how terrible it's going to be. I actually didn't believe it was going to be terrible, and it wasn't. I do take bioidentical hormones. They're natural. They are not man-made, and that has kept me youthful. It has helped to keep my hormones active, and they're measured every year by a doctor who takes care of that for me. I question again everything. Like, I don't think about if somebody says, "Oh, I'm getting dry." Well, if I am dry, I'm dry right now, but I'm not maybe going to be dry the next time. I don't live as if it's so. I think when we live as something is so, it becomes so concrete, it will only be that. Um, if a man, so I had a partner for a lot of years, will not name that partner, and they had premature ejaculation. And for me, that did not bother me because there was all kinds of ways to enjoy pleasure, but it did bother them. And we never quite got through that. And that was difficult. And I had to look at what part was my part and what part was that individual's part. And so, whatever is going on, I have a thought that creates the narrative in my feeling body. And I need to be able to ask myself, is it true?
Mhm.
Right? If I'm making love with somebody and I happen to be dry, there's saliva. I don't need to make a big deal. I don't need to be ashamed. Um, if you're 25 or 35 or 55, if you're not living as if you're alive, are you 71 or 81? Who's more alive? Um, so I think it's really not about our age, it's about what we choose to want to believe. And if there is something that we're working with, what is a solution?
That's great.
Because it is a solution. I have a soul that's alive in here that is looking for freedom of choice and freedom of living. And I've had a lot of journeys along this path. It has not been always straight. It's never been straight, really. I mentioned that I'm listening to erotic books right now and I'm pleasuring myself and I'm really quite enjoying it. And I laugh because I'm saying it on a podcast. And I'm doing that because I'm exploring. I don't have a partner at this time. And before I cross over, I'd love to have a sacred partner that can meet me. And for
Mm.
now, can I enjoy? And I notice how creative I feel afterwards and how alive I feel in the coming day. And so I say explore,
Mm.
what are your thoughts?
Learn to- I don't know why. Sorry.
No worries. It does come back to thoughts. It does come back to what narrative do I have? I really have a narrative that probably and my astrologer says I need a younger partner. And that's has been the last two men that I've dated were younger than me. And my aliveness is young. And so does that mean I wouldn't be open to a man my age? No. It just means that I recognize how much aliveness I have and that it may be more beneficial to me. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I think there's a good chance that a lot of that comes back to the narratives. You know what I mean? If a man, of comparable age is not feeling alive and not, buying into those narratives. I mean, there is definitely a place where people, get physical, like illnesses or whatever it is, and things don't perform. But it was, coming back to that place where, talking about whether you were dry and maybe just that's just for the moment. It also speaks to the idea that, we have a lot of other choices of things to do. And then coming back to that idea of sensation and pleasure and in the body, penetration is not the end all be all of having, a sexual union or a sexual experience with somebody. I'm a real advocate of keeping that arousal alive constantly or consistently throughout your day, throughout your life, with or without a partner. So I love
Food,
you're
music,
listening to these books.
food, music. I was listening to John Baptiste this morning. I love his work. Um, uh, smells in the home, pleasuring food that I enjoy. I've been a vegetarian quite a long time, but I am a good cook, and so having the foods in the house that I enjoy, um, the sensations of the sheets I have, right? Um, if you can only afford one set of good sheets, I well recommend that over a set of two or three. Um, so it's like, can I find where I can enjoy? Because then when I have someone in my world, I can offer that to them also. Also, I would rather make love to a man whose heart is wide open and maybe he doesn't sustain an erection as like he used to, because what I know is that we'll meet each other in a lot of other sensations. But if the heart isn't open, then it's strictly sexual performance or narratives that I'm working with behind the scene. And I haven't had to do that. I'm fortunate that way. Um, I've had 3 long-term relationships. I've been a serial monogamous, so dating's new to me.
Mm. And how are you finding it? Or have you
Well,
gone too very deep into it?
I would say that I'm not real deep into it. I've really dated 2 men, or been with 2 men. Um, so I'm learning, I live in a rural area, so there's some questions there I'm asking. How can I work through where it is that I live versus the amount of time I'd like to spend with someone? So there's a lot there for me to explore right now. I don't have answers.
Well, you talked about traveling quite a bit, and I know
Yeah.
you do that. So you must, there must be, or I would imagine that there's more opportunity to meet people there. Um, but are you finding it difficult because you actually live fairly rural and maybe they don't, the connection between you two might be difficult to maintain? Is
Great
that so?
question. I really think it's the fact that I've had so many losses in the last 5 years, and so the universe has kinda said, "Hey, we're gonna give you just enough for now so that you're not putting your grief somewhere else." Grief can be a very sensual experience. Most of us aren't comfortable grieving.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah.
I mean, I tend to agree with you, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think when someone first learns to grieve, they have a backlog. So they don't know what they're grieving, and it can be extremely overwhelming. Grieving a childhood one never had, or uh, whatever loss. And then when they have a big loss where they have permission, it all comes pouring in. And that's been my experience. And so finding a few individuals that will sit with you, whether it's on the phone or Zoom or in person, and just be there. I have a woman in Taos who I dearly love. She's a death doula, and I was spent the night over at her home the other night, and she just held me, you know, and it was so lovely. There was no barrier between the grief and her being there, giving me that sensation of presence. So we are not encouraged to grieve. And I want to say that if there's an emotion or experience that I would encourage is to learn how to feel loss and grieve and know that it is so normal. And grief will change. It'll find a different form, and timing. And yeah, it's sacred. Grief is a sacred experience. And again, every emotion that we can face makes us better lovers. I know that to be a fact.
Yes, and the allowance of that depth.
Yeah.
There's a certain kind of breaking open that happens, it seems like, and then there's And then it just adds this marbling to our lives, color and texture. And um, yeah, I've experienced some loss, in the last year or so, uh, that strikes me at, you know, just surprising moments.
Yes.
Wa-
Yes.
Watching a trailer for a movie, and all of a sudden, there's tears. Like, what the hell? But yeah.
If I were interviewing you as a man, I would love to know how men feel about grief, because for me, so many emotions seem to flow more freely for women. And for those men who are listening, I find it sexy as hell that you can face an emotion and be present with it and allow a woman to be there with you, or another man, but to be with you and know that you're whole by experiencing what it is. Even if it's rage, knowing that you don't have to act on it. It's just, I'm angry. And it feels like a locomotive inside of me. Now, as a woman, anger was not allowed. And so when it came out, it was rage.
Very, yeah, that's a very, that's another whole subject. That's another whole podcast right there. Rage and sacred rage, and, the anger. But remind me, and I'll send you a poem that I wrote this
Oh,
last
that
year
would
about
be lovely.
men and grieving. So yeah, I wrote a blog about it. Pretty, yeah.
I would appreciate
There is
that.
a difference, and it's no less powerful, is what I would say. And one of the things that I've seen is that an expectation for a man to grieve the way a woman grieves,
Oh, yeah.
show your emotions, whatever it is. Um, but if you allow a man and give him the space to grieve the way he grieves, and especially with other men, yeah, it's a powerful um, process and a witnessing.
Well, what I heard from that, and I'd like to make a point of this, and this is what I've learned about coming back into self. You said to allow men to grieve the way they grieve. And I would say that for anybody, but for a male. And when I come back in here and know that I choose every person, place, and thing that's in front of me as a reflection of what I'm to observe or be a part of, and I see a man in grief, being curious and allowing the space. How much space can I give that person, knowing that their grief is not a reflection of me or the lack thereof? And that is about everything. Is that whatever is going on in that individual, the spin I put on it is about me. What they're experiencing is about them. And can I have allowance and be curious and spacious? Because I don't think any of us truly know in the moment. I think it takes an opening, kind of like expansion of the space. Yeah.
Mm. Well, I think we're gonna start maybe winding this down a little bit.
Yay.
But so I do have a few questions that I want to pop at you and see how we do with these. Okay.
Okay.
Um, in the sense of devotion, like,
Mm.
what do you give yourself to daily or ritually?
What arose for me is the sacred moment. So I wake up very early in the morning. It just happens. And I sit for 2 hours.
Mm.
And I don't have a story about what I need to do during that time. Sometimes I meditate, sometimes I write, sometimes I read. But the devotion to silence and listening to myself in the morning, listening deeply. I'm clairaudient, so I hear things. And devotion, we devote ourselves to all kinds of things. But I think the most important is devoting myself to self, to make the time. Don't make it a big deal, right or wrong, good or bad, up or down, and listen. How am I today? I did something real silly. I took a bunch of vitamins and stuff together that ended up giving me an upset stomach today. And so that shifted for a little bit. And I thought, am I going to need to cancel this? It's like, can we be present for what is, but allowing some time, whether you begin with 10 minutes or 2 hours, devote yourself to self.
And in that process of your own becoming,
Yeah.
what are you most proud of for yourself?
I got choked up. That I'm real. That I've devoted myself to my family and the healing of it. My father, who I mentioned, spoke to me poorly when I was younger. We've healed over the last 46 years. He read my book, helped him understand. He's 95 and a half, and I'm there for him. I have returned twice a year for 28 years to St. Louis to devote myself to our relationship and becoming, and never shaming or blaming him. The same way with my brother, I go 2 or 3 times a year and give my sister-in-law an opportunity to rest, where I go to the nursing home and shave him and feed him and brush his teeth. I'm very proud of the woman that I am today and how real I am, and
Well,
meeting
I
my
can attest
feelings.
to that. Your authenticity came through right from the first time I met you, I remember.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Mm.
I appreciate you.
Igualmente. Yes,
Yeah. And the work that you're doing in the world and the work that I'm doing, and we need all of us.
we do.
Mhm.
So if you had, I want to call it a somatic prayer, but it's just a prayer for the next generation of healers or people that are coming into this kind of work and with the intentions like you and I hold for more authenticity, more creativity, more connection, more erotic authority. Yeah, some sort of a prayer for them.
To thine own self be true. Know thyself. I am not my gifts. I am the sum of everything, and know that. Stay curious. Allow others to be their own healer by being the witness to that. And allow all of us to share in the commonality of our soul's essence. Therein lies the solution. It's not our age, it's not our narratives, it's the unraveling of all of that and the freedom to be together, to gather.
To gather together. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit speechless.
Well, so
If you have, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Any other last minute?
don't
We're
compare
not
yourself.
time pressed.
Well,
We
don't,
can go into
I
another
think
whole hour and a half if you want. But
so. I do speech, I do speaking engagements and podcasts and such. I want to leave people with you're not alone. Don't compare. You're on your journey, and there was a time when I couldn't look people in the eyes, nor could I handle them touching me or hugging me. This is an evolutionary journey, not an arrival. And that if you're committed to knowing yourself, yeah, there's a beautiful world. Just beauty, just so much available. And I'm just on the precipice of it.
What does Rumi say? There's a field. Meet me there.
Yeah. So, no comparison. Let's meet each other in that field. You're not alone. Yeah. Thank you, James. I look for more play with you, my friend.
Absolutely, me too. And I just love you to pieces.
Thank you. I feel the same
love
way.
you to life. That's what
Yeah,
I
I love
think
you to life.
words.
Yeah,
You
love you to
tomorrow.
life.
And just your beingness in your aliveness is incredibly inspirational. I mean, I have to say that, it's like a beacon of light, really, in the
Well,
world. And I just want people to see that.
thank you.
I hope they do.
And I hope they can hear what's possible. That's really what my message is. You're not alone. Whether you choose somebody like James or myself to work with, or whoever you feel called to, please know that we join you on that journey. You're not alone, and I'm excited for you. It's a wonderment that I can't even explain. And there will be dark nights of the soul. Just know that that precipice that you're on will crack if you sit in it.
This too
So,
shall pass.
yes, it will. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you, Shakeen. It's so good to see you, and we'll see you again soon. Okay.
Yes. Love you too. Bye.